أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين بارئ خلائق الأجمعين باعث الأنبياء والمرسلين صلى الله وسلم عليك يا رسول الله صلى الله وسلم عليك يا نبي الله وعلى آل بيتك الطيبين الطاهرين صلى الله وسلم عليك يا أبا عبد الله يا ابن رسول الله يا رحمة الله الواسعة يا باب نجاة الأمة يا غريب يا غريب يا مظلوم كربلاء ما خاب من تمسك بكم وأمن من لجأ إليكم فيا ليتنا كنا معكم سادتي فنفوز والله فوزا عظيما. قال الله تبارك وتعالى وهو أصدق القائلين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم خلق الإنسان من عجل سأريكم آياتي فلا تستعجلون آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوات صلي على السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. I begin in the name of Allah, the most kind, the most merciful. It's due to that kindness and mercy that we get these opportunities where we gather in remembrance and in glorification of Him, Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. And then we send our condolences to our 12th and living Imam Al-Hujjah Ajjalallahu Ta'ala Farajahu Sharif. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, and to each and every one of you as we continue the remembrance of the musibah that befell the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. It's amazing that the days of Azar are going by so fast, that we are already on the 20th now, and in 20 days we will be inshallah commemorating the Arba'iniyah or the Zainabiyah of when she returns back to Karbala. And it's a good time to remind ourselves, right, of the tremendous opportunity that we have at our disposal at this time to maximize on these opportunities, to really bring about a revolution within ourselves. It's not just about how many lectures you attend, it's really not. But it's about how well you connect to the message of Aba Abdullah alayhi salam. It's very easy for us to become jaded, it's so easy. We've all attended a ton of house majalises up to now. I have no doubt about that. This is my third majlis of the day. Some of you are repeat people that I have seen throughout the day. And when one attends so many things, it's very easy for one to just attend for the sake of rituals, or for the sake of showing face to somebody, or to be nice to somebody. But we have to look past that, because these opportunities don't come by that often, to be quite honest. These opportunities to revitalize our hearts, to revive our hearts, are a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we have to use this opportunity, I've talked to a lot of people, and like some of the same sentiments I hear over and over again is that, like we feel like there's something missing within us, we feel disconnected, we don't feel connected. It's not just the youth who have told me these things, and again, it's not everybody, but there's a lack of, I don't know what the word that they use, but basically it's that there's an emptiness within them, that they are looking for something to fill within themselves so that they can strive towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the only advice that I can give is that when I look back at my life, right, and I shared this with you, I think I've shared this in every lecture, that it's this azadari that has kept me going in what I do. From the time that I was a child, it's this azadari and the rituals that we do and the connection. More than that, my family always emphasized understanding what we're doing, right? Seeing the intention behind what our actions are. It wasn't just simply attending majalis, but it was trying to see what we can apply into our lives. And it's this crying in the months of Muharram and Safar. It's the matam, it's the participating in the azaa that have always kept me connected, even though the world may have tried to sway me away, And so that's the only advice I give to anyone who feels that there's a lack of connection that they're having with God, or an emptiness that they feel within themselves, is to immerse yourself in this azadari. It is. It can be revolutionary, right? Because that's the honor God has given to Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam. Yeah, it is. There's a prophetic tradition that says, "Inna al-Hussain misbahul huda wa safinatun najah." That indeed Hussain is the light of salvation and the ship of salvation and the lamp of guidance, right? So a man asks our sixth Imam alayhi salam, "Alastu kullukum sufunullah?" Are you all not the ships of salvation? And he says, "Bala kulluna sufunullah illa anna safinatul Hussain awsa wa asra." Yeah? He says, yes, we are all the ships of salvation, except the ship of Hussain is wider and faster. Yeah? That means if you want something, climb aboard the ship of Hussain alayhi salam, right? You feel an emptiness within you. Immerse yourself in the azaa of Aba Abdullah. Sit at home, take part in being a person who cries for Imam al-Hussain alayhi salam. Sometimes we can't cry in public, Sometimes the speaker won't make you cry. But you have to find something that gets you connected, whether it is watching a Karbala movie, for example, that gets you connected, or whether it's listening to a particular noha or a marsiya in your particular language that you're connecting with. But sit home alone, recite a marsiya, honestly. One of the coolest things that I did was when I was in Iraq. I was in Mashhad, and it happened to be the fourth Imam's wafat when I was in Mashhad, and I was thinking, what can I do? Because I didn't understand Farsi, so I couldn't go to a majlis, or I didn't know where the majalis were. So I said, there are traditions that tell us that the seventh and the eighth Imams, that when Muharram would come about, they would bring poets, and then they would have the poets recite for them, and then the Imams would sit and cry, And I said, what an amazing opportunity if I got to be the poet for the Imam tonight, And so I sat there, I got a spot. It's not easy to get a spot right next to the Wari of Imam al-Ridha if you've been there, it's quite hectic. And I just sat there and I recited a marsiya that I knew, and I recited some masaib that I knew, and I cried. And in my mind, I pictured the Imam crying, And that got me charged, to be quite honest. It really got me charged. So do something like that, Don't lose these opportunities. Fill your buckets with Aba Abdullah, especially for the youngsters here, If you're not going to connect yourself now to him, it's going to be difficult to connect yourself later to him. Hold on fast to him now. Do something for him now, We'll get this anecdote, right, that once Allama Tabatabai, Sahib al-Mizan, came to a majlis and he was sitting by a mimbar. I know I've said this story numerous times here, right? And the Sahib, or the organizer of the Husainiya, came and he didn't recognize Allama, so he tried to shoo him away because next to the mimbar was prime spot, And so when Allama looked up and he apologized immediately, he said, "Oh, I'm so sorry." He said, "I thought you were merely a marsiya reciter, And Allama looks at him and says, "How I wish I was a marsiya reciter." He says, "Everything that I have done up to now is nothing compared to one who recites one marsiya for Aba Abdullah alayhi salam. Yeah? So take these opportunities, my brothers and sisters. We don't know where we're going to be next year. We don't know where we're going to be in life. But where we can always be is one who was the azadar of Aba Abdullah alayhi salam. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. I pretty much repeated that same thing, every time I lecture, especially during these 40 days, because that's how much I value this time, and I think it's really important that if I can affect one person, I will be successful, and inshallah we'll be able to affect many more than just one person, inshallah. We're going to continue what we started our discussion on the 10th night. That was my last lecture. And what we discussed basically was that we reached to an understanding after a very lengthy introduction that Imam alayhi salam's sacrifice was with the intention of setting up the foundation for the final coming of the 12th Imam. Yeah? In other words, the Imam alayhi salam, when he went to Karbala, he did not have the intention of overthrowing Yazid or of eliminating the Yazids of the time. But rather the Imam alayhi salam wanted to plant the seeds that which the 12th Imam will harvest later on. Right? Because as we said, right, and I think it's a really important point for us to understand, if his goal was to overthrow Yazid or to get rid of the likes of Yazid, then one can argue that the Imam failed in what he did. Right? But that's not what happened, is it? Right? The Imam, we consider him to be successful, not just us, anyone who looks at the battle, who looks at what happened, says Hussain was successful. It was because of the hard work of Zainab as well and Imam Sajjad alayhi salam as well, but he was successful. But the reason why he was successful, because he successfully planted the seeds that the 12th Imam would harvest later on. Yeah? He wanted to show us that sometimes when you want a big change to happen, you need an immense sacrifice to go into that particular change. And he gave that immense sacrifice. But he planted these seeds, and I use the example of seeds because it's easiest to understand what I'm trying to say. That when a farmer plants his seeds, he will harvest the crops months later. The Imam planted the seeds. The 12th Imam will harvest it later. That entire time between harvesting or between planting and harvesting, there has to be nurturing of the seeds. And it's the job of the Shia to nurture those seeds. Yeah? We have to water those seeds. We have to remove the weeds from those seeds. We have to make sure that people don't pick up and misuse these seeds, for example. Right? And so, in reality, the reason why the 12th Imam hasn't yet come is because the Shia for the longest time have failed in nurturing those seeds. Right? We haven't done the job effectively that is required. And so you see that there's this immense responsibility that you and I have, right? Like we can't, sometimes, as my heart just wants to jump out, we can't be satisfied with just the status quo anymore. We have to want to be those people, right? There was this interesting program, I didn't get to listen to it, but I just liked the title. What if the Imam was just waiting for you? Honestly, what if that was the case and you're the only person left, right? Or I'm the only person left. Imagine, I'm delaying the process of the Imam alayhi salam coming, right? So I think if we understand that, right? So that's the overall synopsis, or that's the overall, a very beautiful understanding about the role of the 3rd Imam and the 12th Imam, how he planted the seeds and we are waiting for the harvesting of these seeds, but we have to, in the middle, make sure that we're continuing the process of nurturing. One of the lessons that we take from that particular understanding is the importance of not being hasty in what we do. Okay? And that in every action that we take and every goal that we have, it's very important that we don't just rush into it, right? But rather we make sure that all the preconditions are met of that particular task before embarking upon that task. You follow me or no? Right? It's a small lesson from it. It's not the overall lesson. Keep the overall lesson as a thinking point, as a learning point. But from that, we're going to take this small lesson and we're going to expound upon it. That the Imam teaches us that you don't always have to be hasty in what you do. You don't always have to be rash and impatient in what you do. Rather, thinking about the consequences of an action, making sure that the preconditions of an action are fulfilled before going into it is actually what is required for human beings to be successful. Now, that is pretty contrary to what the world implants within us, right? Because what do we mean by that, right? Like if you look in the world that we live in a world of almost instant gratification or satisfaction, right? Where, if a thought comes into my mind, sometimes if, for example, and you can't sleep and a thought pops into your mind and you're thinking that, oh, what's the answer to this? Now all I have to do is just take my phone and Google it and I get the answer right away, right? I find that I can get answers quicker. For example, if I'm hungry and it's like 2 a.m, it's not that I can just say to myself, okay, Baba, just be patient. I'm going to drive to Tim's. It's open 24 hours, right? And so I'm satisfied immediately. It's almost like what the world is teaching us is that it's okay to act on your impulses because you are being satisfied when you act upon your impulses. Yeah, you understand? The world is teaching us this. But if you really think about it, in most cases, acting hastily will always lead to regret. In most cases, right? I did a lot of research on this. It's amazing how much material is there on being hasty and not being. They call it haste is waste, But for example, let's say you're an impulse shopper. So you see something, you buy it, right? When people are impulse shoppers, more times than not, they will regret what they bought. Yeah, even if they use it, they will regret it. Why? So one of the reasons why they say they will regret it is that one of the charms of shopping is the actual hunt of shopping, right? Of trying something on, see if it fits. No, let's go to another store. Let's go look at this. And then I'm going to come to, let me shop around. No, but when you impulsively buy it, you don't have that excitement prior, right? It's like someone got married without the engagement period. They don't have that same period before that, right? Or you'll find somebody who impulsively or rashly or hastily buys. In a couple of weeks, they'll go return that thing because they just don't need it anymore, right? They thought they would use it, but they don't use it. Or it doesn't fit. Or they found it cheaper somewhere else. But they're not always satisfied, right? In fact, they say most of the time, impulsive buyers will regret what they bought. You take another example of acting hastily. Someone writes you an email and it upsets you and you say, I'm going to reply back right now. And you hit send. More times than not, you will regret writing that email. If only you had paused for a little bit, thought about it, slept on it, and then replied the next day, for sure the reply the next day would be different than the reply you would give if somebody returns back right away, right? Accepting a project quickly. We can go through a list of examples where acting hastily actually is harmful for us, right? It brings about a sense of regret. Now, I know that these examples that I've given to you are benign, right? They're like simple examples. But sometimes acting hastily actually leads to big-time life problems, I was reading a court case of 4 teenagers. And these 4 teenagers, in their minds, they were just having fun, right? But what they would do is they would go from house to rob houses, right? And in their mind, they were just joyriding, having fun. They were going from place to place. And they would go to places that seemed like no one was there. They would break in. But if you literally ask them, so you'll see what they say, like in the end, but they go into this one house, just acting just on impulse, basically, right? It's fun. It's not that they needed what they were robbing. It was the high of joy, of the joy of actually the adrenaline rush that was taking place. Until they went to one house where the owner of the house was there, who had a gun and shot and killed one of those 4 kids, right? And then when you hear the court transcripts, one of them actually replied back, it was never our plan to hurt. It was just to go out and have some fun, But you see that they didn't think about their actions, right? They didn't think about the consequences. The same thing happens when someone, na'udhu billah, drinks and drives, for example, right? In that moment, they acted in haste, right? They acted impulsively without thinking that, oh my God, I could actually get arrested. I could actually get in trouble. I could actually hurt somebody else. And so you see that many people who actually harm somebody, who hurt somebody, didn't think through their consequences, right? Let's not take that haram example. Let's look at just like a simple thing like texting and driving, right? We do that all the time, unfortunately. But if someone writes to you, you're driving, you can wait 20 minutes till you get to your destination. But impulsiveness will tell you to just tell them you're driving. Now you're texting them you're driving. And we don't think about the consequences of that particular action going forward, right? You look at it even in a larger example of the war on terror, right? The war on terror that America started as a result, as a hasty response to the Twin Towers collapse. Hasty response. They attacked who out of all countries? Afghanistan. Yeah? Nothing to do with anything, right? And you see that their supposed war on terror, a hasty response to an attack upon them, has caused such damage that the world has not seen before, the kind of damage that it's been to. You just look at some of the statistics that the death from terrorism after 9/11 has gone up by 4,500% throughout the world. A war on terror that has increased the amount of terrorism that is taking place, right? There have been over 1,850 suicide attacks in Iraq since 9/11, when there hadn't been one prior to 9/11. Think about that, right? Last year alone, 2,600 civilians died in Afghanistan. Civilians, people who had nothing to do. This is 17 years after the beginning of the war on terror. But these are examples, and I think it's really important for us to understand that what Islam has to say about this subject, because whether we're looking at something as benign as buying something that I have to return, or something as large as texting while driving, or something larger than that, where we see, for example, war on terror, acting hastily without looking into the entire picture, without making sure that the preconditions are set, hardly ever results in a positive response. Hardly ever, right? There are so many traditions about this. It's amazing what our religion says about this. For example, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, ma salli ala. He says in a tradition, إِنَّمَا أَهْلَكَ النَّاسَ الْعَجَلَ وَلَوْ أَنَّ النَّاسَ تَثَبَّتُوا لَمْ يَهْلِكْ أَحَدٌ. Yeah? He says that verily haste has ruined people. Yeah? And if instead people proceeded with caution, no one would be ruined. Yeah? Remarkable, right? That our religion goes into that extent about talking about haste, acting in haste, impulsively. I've heard of so many interesting stories, where it's mostly doctors, because doctors have to get up at like 2 or 3 in the morning and rush out, right? But when they have that emergency call, I've actually heard of 2 or 3 stories of this where they got a call and they had to leave, but they didn't check behind them as they were pulling out of their driveway, right? And there was either somebody had parked there, or the garage door was closed, or something had happened, and the result of their hasty action caused more damage. You think about your own examples. I'm running out of examples, but you'll find that in most cases, right? Acting hastily without planting the right seeds never produces good results. We sometimes, I can think of a personal example. I remember I had gone to a community in America. And so one of the executive members there, he had this grand idea. He said that, what we should do is we should create a rotation of resident alims, So he said in 2 years, one works here, then another 2 years, one works here, and another 2 years works here. So I looked at the guy, and I said, what makes you think we want to live a circus life, first of all? Right? That we're just traveling. I pick up and travel. Like, where's our family responsibility with that, right? But I was like, secondly, when you get a resident alim in a community, you need to give that resident alim time to plant seeds within that community, right? And the results of that may not be seen for a generation or two, but you can see the nurturing of that with time. You look at any community today, and there's only about 4 or 5 communities that we have that have had a resident alim for 8 or plus years within that community. And you'll see the change within that community because the resident alim has time to nurture what the seeds were planted. And of course, the responsibility comes with all of us, right? But there's never anything good that will come from simply hastily doing something, whether it's my example or these other examples. Another tradition, just to add to this, from Amirul Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, Salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. He says, Ashaddun nas tadamatan nadamatan wa aktharuhum malamatan al-ajila alladhi la yudrikuhu aqluhu illa ba'da fawti amrihi. He says, of all the people, the one with the greatest regret is the hasty and rash person who is not subdued by his intellect until after the affair is lost. So you can see that our religion has talked a lot about this. God has talked a lot about this in the Holy Quran as well. And this is going to be our subject for the next 3 or 4 lectures that we have a chance, about hastiness. Now, today is just a very introductory lecture on this, but from the Islamic terminology, the word for hastiness is ajala. Ain, ja, lam, and ta marbuta. The same ajil farajahu we say. The same ajala is used for hastiness. And the person who is hasty is known as ajul. Somebody who is ajul, always acting hastily. Now, the definition of haste from an ilmul akhlaq position, we're talking about simply akhlaqi definition, is one who rushes into an action without careful consideration or deliberation. Right? So one who rushes into an action without thinking about that action fully, and or to add to it, to rush into an action without fulfilling its preconditions. Right? So now obviously if you think about it, you'll fulfill all the conditions necessary if you want to see that successful. But a person who sees glitter runs to it, not realizing that there may be snakes on the road, for example, is basically a person who is ajul, a person who is hasty from an Islamic perspective. Now, it's important that we don't confuse speed and quickness with hastiness. Okay? So, we'll all meet people. We've all met people who walk fast, who talk fast. Okay? And people will always say, Al-ajalata min ash-shaytan, ajalata. That person is just talking fast. He's not hasty. Right? There's a difference between hastiness and speaking quickly. Right? There's a difference between hastiness and walking quickly. Even in martial arts, my daughter's in karate, they always preach the same thing, right? Speed equals success, speed equals success, speed equals success. And so even in sports, they say that. So when you look at those definitions or those examples, that's not the haste we're talking about. Right? Speed is not haste. Quickness is not haste. Haste, again, to repeat, is to act without giving proper deliberation to what is happening. Just acting on impulse. Just acting because I feel like acting. My desires tell me to jump, so I'm jumping, for example, right? Now, the way to understand is that you understand the opposite of haste. And the opposite of ajala is as-sabru wa ta'an. Yeah? Sabr and ta'an. Sabr is patience, but ta'an is to act with deliberation, with careful thinking, with careful reflecting, with pondering. Now, I know what it sounds like, right? Because I have to be very careful. So basically, it's sounding like I'm saying that every action will take 10 minutes to make tea, Like about how much water. No, that's not what we're talking about either. You know what I mean? That means we wouldn't do anything. We'll become like a sloth, We would move very, very slowly in our actions. There's a balance that we need to seek. And that's what we're going to discuss. Because it's a fascinating topic, to be quite honest, right? You see, so we're told in one hand, don't act hastily, be deliberate in what you do. But then there are times when we are told to act hastily. When? In particular, when I have deliberated on an action. Once I have sat and I have reflected and I have said, you know what? I have looked at everything, this is good, don't waste time anymore, rush into it. That's when haste is required. Right? And on the other hand, like deliberateness is bad sometimes. Like to actually think about it. Like when? Like for example, God says give sadaqah. And I'll be like, wait a minute. Yeah, let me analyze this for a moment. Right? Like calculate. No. At that time, being deliberate is actually a negative quality. So you see that sometimes haste is bad, sometimes haste is good. Sometimes deliberateness is bad, sometimes it is good. So as a whole, we need to just learn this subject better. So to know when to run to action and when to actually sit and reflect about this action. Inshallah, when we come back in the next lecture, we'll answer some simple questions about why we as human beings are hasty, right? What is the reason we are like this? And what are the circumstances and times when we should be rushing into action. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. We are in these days when we continue our commemoration and remembrance of the tragedy that befell the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. We always say that the musibah for Imam al-Hussain ended on the day of Ashura. But the musibah of Zainab continued to pile on. It is why we call her Ummul Masa'ib. For the trials and tribulations that Zainab has seen, no one else has seen before. We are in these days when we remember how the family was taken from Kufa to Sham. A fifth Imam alayhi salam asks his father, he says, Ya Abata, tell me about the journey from Kufa to Sham. The Imam alayhi salam says, my son, they tied shackles around my hands and my legs, and they placed our women on unsaddled camels, and they put the heads of our family on spears, and when we would cry, they would whip us from behind. He just said this continued all the way from Kufa to Damascus. Our fifth Imam alayhi salam, when he was giving ghusl on his father, as he turned his body, he began to cry out loud. They asked him, Yabna Rasulillah, what makes you cry in this way? He says, when I turned my father's body, I saw the marks of the whips and chains that had fallen upon his body. Wa Hussaina. It is said that when the family reached the outskirts of Sham, they made the family wait outside for 3 days as they decorated that city. And then when they opened the gates, Abu Mikhnaf reports in his Maqtal that when they opened the gates, the first head to walk in was the head of Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas. And then the family was paraded, and the last head was the head of Abu Abdullah. Abu Mikhnaf says the head of Abu Abdullah was shining like a bright moon. And then there came a lady who took a rock and began to hit the head of Abu Abdullah. Wa waila, wa musibata. My heart asks me if Kulthum or if Zainab looked at the head of Abbas and said, Oh Abul Fadl, if you were here today, this would not be happening. It is said as the family was lined up and paraded in the city of Sham, there happened to come a man from Medina by the name of Sahal bin Sa'ad. Sahal bin Sa'ad did not know what happened to Imam al-Hussein, but he saw the caravan of pride lined up. He saw one young girl in chains. He comes up to this young girl. He says, "My child, what is your name?" She said, "Ana Sukaynatu bint al-Hussein." He says, "My name is Sukayna, the daughter of Hussein." He said, "What Hussein is this?" He said, "This is the grandson of Rasulullah." When he heard this, Sahal was shocked. He says to Sukayna, he says, "Is there anything I can do for you?" You know what Sukayna says? Sukayna says, "Ya Sheikh, do you have any money with you?" Sahal looks at her and says, "My child, what will you do with money in this situation?" She says, "Do you see that man who is holding the head of my father?" She said, "If you can pay him and ask him to move to the front so that the people don't look at the haram of Rasulullah, but they are busy concentrating on the head of my father." Sahal does what was requested, and then he comes to Sayyid al-Sajideen, Imam Zainul Abidin. He says to him, "Ya Mawlai, is there anything that I can do for you?" It is said Imam al-Sajjad asked, "Oh Sahal, do you happen to have a piece of cloth with you?" Sahal again is surprised. He says, "Sayyidi, out of all the things you can ask for, you ask for a piece of cloth." He says, "Oh Sahal, since they have put these chains around my neck, it is piercing my skin. A piece of cloth would allow me to have a little bit of rest." فَسَيَعْلَمُ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا أَيَّ مُنقَلَبٍ يَنقَلِبُونَ والعاقبة للمتقين إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. ماتم Hussain.